All right, welcome back. We're going to kick off part two here of Europeans Explore the East. In part one, we had been talking about the Caravel, the new ship that allowed Europeans to travel further, and we had also talked about how Portugal, with the help of Prince Henry and Vasco da Gama, had found a treasure trove of wealth in India. And naturally, there's going to be competition that follows suit. So let's take a look at where we're going next with this. Of course, our next country that we need to talk about is right next door to Portugal. We're going to talk about Spain. It'd be very difficult for the Spanish not to see the wealth coming into Portugal. Portuguese are going to spend that money. The Spanish are going to see that. They're going to say, maybe I want to get involved on that as well. So the age of exploration here, Spain also makes claims. Well, Spain watched Portugal with envy, and that's not hard for us to believe. As I mentioned, you're going to see the wealth coming in, you're going to see what your neighbors are doing, and naturally you're going to try to emulate that because they're making a lot of money. So it's at this time in 1492 that Christopher Columbus convinces Spain to finance a very bold plan of finding a sea route to Asia. Christopher Columbus, he's from Venice, Italy. He's not even Spanish. But he goes to Isabella and Ferdinand of Spain and says, hey, the world's not flat, it's round. Give me some money, give me some ships, and let's try something new. Let's not go the same way the Portuguese went. Instead, I'm going to go west. And people thought, oh, all that's out there is water. You're going to fall off the planet. You're going to die. We're never going to see you again. And Columbus said, you just wait and see. Now, when Columbus reached America, both he and the Portuguese had suspected he had reached Asia. The Portuguese thought he had reached the same areas that they had been to, and that he had claimed all this land for Spain that Portugal had already claimed. Well, that's going to be problematic, of course. If one country claims a piece of land, another country claims a piece of land, and they find out it's the same piece of land, there's going to be some conflict. That's exactly what happens here. So this increased the exploration rivalry between Spain and Portugal. But if you have a dispute like this, and you're both very Catholic countries, after all, this is about 15 years before Martin Luther pounds his grievances on the door of the church. So everybody in Europe is Catholic at this point. If you need someone to help you out to try to settle this dispute, of course, you call the Pope. So the Pope steps in and attempts to settle who has claim over these lands. And the result of this, from the Pope stepping in, is something called the Treaty of Tordesillas, also called the Line of Demarcation. So the result is the Treaty of Tordesillas of 1494. It's a line that divided Spain and Portugal's land claims. Spain got all of the land on the west of the line, which included most of the Americas. Portugal got lands on the east, which included parts of modern-day Brazil. Now, you have to understand, here in 1494, this is only 2 years after this land was discovered, they had no idea how much land was truly there. So if you look at this, there's one clear winner in all of this, and that's clearly the Spanish. I don't think that's because the Pope was favoring Spain. I think mostly it's because they didn't know how much land was truly there. So that's why in this part of the world today, you see mostly Spanish-speaking people, and in Brazil, they speak Portuguese, all because of the Treaty of Tordesillas of 1494, which divided the land claims of Spain and Portugal. The last group to get involved in this story are the Dutch. Now, you wouldn't think a tiny country like this is going to be a major player in the age of exploration, but one of the advantages that they have is they have access to water, which naturally means they're going to be shipbuilders. So let's talk about the Dutch, aka the Netherlands. So the people of this region declared their independence from Spain in 1581 and established the Dutch Republic. At the end of this unit, we're going to look at how the Spanish Empire weakens. Part of the reason the Spanish Empire weakens is because they can't hang on to the Netherlands. The Netherlands break free and can basically become autonomous. They control themselves, and that's going to definitely hurt Spain in the long run. But regardless, the Dutch Republic is established here in 1581. By the 1600s, the Dutch had the largest fleet of ships in the world. They had 20,000 caravels, 20,000 vessels. Well, you talk about a country that wants to go explore and make money. You need ships to do it, so naturally that's going to help them out quite a bit. So what they create is the Dutch East India Company. You hear the word East India. They call that the East Indies over near India. The idea was it was a company that could mint its own money, could make treaties, could even raise an army. It was a company that was there to conduct trade out in India. And it's going to be very successful in the early days of the Age of Exploration. It's going to be far richer and more powerful than the British East India Company, but that's going to change because eventually the British, as we're going to find out in one of our later units, are going to come to dominate India. Eventually, the Dutch drove out the English and established dominance over the East Indies. But like I said, the English will come roaring back. Gives you an idea kind of what we're looking at here. Got different trade routes. You've got India here. Got China, Japan, as we're going to see. But here's the Dutch East Indies. The Dutch really controlled this area. You can see it definitely got lots of spices, cloth, silver, ivory. You can see the different things that people wanted to get from these different regions. Here in China, porcelain, sugar, silk, precious metals. These are all things that were not indigenous to Europe. So you load up on a lot of these things, bring them back to Europe and sell them at a high price, you're going to make a lot of money. So that brings us to the end. What we've seen here today is we've seen a new ship that's able to travel further, and we've seen how the Portuguese started all this with Vasco da Gama and with Prince Henry financing those journeys. We saw how Spain got involved, and we saw how the Dutch got involved here to really start exploring the East. So a result is the Age of Exploration would begin a competitive and expensive pursuit that would lead the Europeans to India, the Far East, and eventually the New World. All right, we've seen a lot today. We've talked about how the Portuguese started exploring with Prince Henry and Vasco da Gama. We saw how the Spanish joined in, and we saw how the Dutch eventually came to be big players in the Age of Exploration. So if we come back to our question, summarize the European motivations for transoceanic trade, as well as the innovations allowed them to travel further, we first have to focus on our motivation being God, glory, and gold. And that's right there on your note sheet. The idea was you want to travel and spread Christianity. You wanted to make a lot of money for yourself. That's the gold part. And then the glory part is, to be famous, to certainly make put your stamp on the world, so to speak. So the God, glory, and gold is really the big motivation. As long as you can explain that, you've got the first part of that question down. The second part says, what are the innovations that allowed them to travel further? Well, we have to talk about the sextant being a new instrument that helped navigation, charting latitude and longitude. But the big innovation is the caravel. It was a new ship that had triangular sails that were stronger against the wind. It sat higher in the water, so it had a shallower draft, larger cargo area, and plus it was just a sturdier ship. So you needed that to be able to travel further and do your trading and things like that. So that should really do everything that we needed to do to answer that question. Certainly look back at your notes and give yourself a rating 4, 3, 2, 1 on how you feel and how comfortable you are with that question. So that's going to do it for us here today. I hope you learned something. We'll see you next time.